Whoa, I got to take that off. Episode 3, starting off with some technical difficulties. Thank you, everyone that has checked out our previous episodes and reached out with all the feedback, looking to get on the podcast. I've had a lot of requests on how to do that. You just send me an email right here, or if you're watching this on social media or wherever you're at, just shoot me a DM. We'll get you set up, get you scheduled. And for episode 3, I had to get on a vet, someone that's been with Phish for a while. I met this guy through a Phish message board, I guess you would call it, Wikipog. It's a lot of Phish bullies on there. It's fun. And this week, coming from Texas, Dave Pie Guy Anderson. If I can get my guy on here, 22/7 guy. What's up, man?
So Pie Guy was taken. So I'm 22/7 guy on Instagram.
Makes a little, you got to use your brain a little bit there. You're like 22/7. Let me pull up my calculator there.
And then you realize, oh, wait, that's 3. Okay, he's Pie Guy. That makes sense.
So
math checks out.
With Pie Guy, interesting. Is that literally just because you love pie?
So it's a funny story, actually. A buddy of mine here in Austin started a company called Boomerang's Meat Pies that you can find in the freezer section of your local grocery store. Not to drop a plug or anything.
The first ad on the podcast. Boomerang Meat Pies.
My buddy Jack started this company called Boomerangs, and he would, when he was first starting out, he would have a booth at like Austin City Limits Music Festival here in town. And that first year, he didn't have any money to like hire help, so a bunch of us just volunteered to come in and help him. And he gave us all these shirts that say "I Heart Pie" in such a huge font that you can see it from like 300 yards away.
The green shirt, right?
Well, it's a yellow shirt with green writing. Yeah,
okay,
yeah. And so I wore that to the Hampton reunion show in 2009. And I was behind the band, and like people on the floor could see the I Heart Pie shirt behind the band all night. Anyway, this guy that's from the POG, I heard you mention, we call him Road Jimmy, but his name's Jonathan. He's a big podcaster as well.
He is.
He I think probably couldn't remember my name the next day and just called me Pie Guy, and it stuck.
That's a good nickname to have.
So, and I do love pie. Like I made 2 pies for Thanksgiving yesterday.
Yeah, I love you leaned into it too. Like it's a good name.
And I'm kind of I love to wear that shirt. Like I wear it to Jazz Fest a lot, and I'm a bigger guy these days. Like I've got a good gut on me, and there's always that kind of the double entendre of, oh, you love pie. Like what does that mean? Like if you were a skinny guy wearing that shirt, you'd think, oh, he's being ironic or whatever. But you see it on this gut, and you're like, no. I think that guy just loves pie.
So now that we're talking about pie, what is your favorite? If you had to pick a favorite pie of all time, what's your go-to?
So apple, and the apple pie I made for yesterday is the best one I've made ever. Like the 2 pies I made yesterday were fantastic.
Straight up homemade?
Yeah. Like my mom's recipe,
Dude, I crushed an apple pie yesterday, but it was from Sam's Club. But it was still like, you get to that certain level of Thanksgivingness, it was really good. I would love to.
So here's the trick, and now that I make the pie myself, I feel no guilt about this anymore. When my mom was making the pies, she always laid on the guilt pretty thick. But I take my pie, I put it in a bowl, pour milk over it like a bowl of cereal, and that to me is the mom.
Oh, I've never done that.
Yeah, now you know.
I'll have to do it. Yeah,
pretty soon you'll be fat like me.
No, you have all these. I remember these food hacks because I remember. I remember we were in Chicago, I think it was, or like going somewhere, and we were talking about like go-to breakfast, like the fast food breakfast, and you were like, got on the subject of McGriddles or sausage biscuits or whatever it was, and you were like, dude, you got to sub for the round egg. Yeah. And I was like, the round egg. And I was like, oh, like the one they put on like the McMuffins. Yep. He was like, yeah, you can ask for it. And I was like, dude, that is a way better egg. And the first time I did it, I was like, this is a game changer. Like, this is the best Just you never think because like that square yellow egg is
It's just not right.
it's not good. It's not even egg. All right. Is this a food
I'll never
podcast?
steer you wrong on food, man. This is not a food podcast, but I will not steer you wrong, man. Come to Jazz Fest with me one year, and
Dude, I would love to.
I'll feed you well.
That's the thing. I do love food. This could be a food podcast. But let's get into Phish. All right.
Let's do it.
You have been with Phish for a while. So when was what year? Like,
so this summer 2022, I'll hit my 30th year of seeing Phish.
wow.
So my first show was July 11, 1992, board tour. So it was Garden State Arts Center in New Jersey. The first band on stage was Colonel Bruce Hampton, the Aquarium Rescue Unit.
That's dope.
And then they so cool, man. So it was my first like real show. We're gonna dive in and start telling stories already. So
yeah,
it was like my first like real show, other than like I'd seen Rush in a big arena. I'd seen some other shows, but it was my first kind of jam bandy show and whatever. So Colonel Bruce Hampton, the Aquarium Rescue Unit's on stage. One by one, the members of Widespread Panic come on stage, and one by one, they start jamming together. And one by one, the members of Colonel Bruce Hampton, the Aquarium Rescue Unit, start leaving the stage until now it's Widespread Panic playing.
That's a cool way of doing it, dude.
So like my first, I'm like, whoa, this is not normal. Like this is not, Rush in a big arena where it's to a click track and it's the exact same show every night. Like, no, this is interesting. What's going on here, right?
Yeah.
So Aquarium Rescue Unit, Widespread Panic, the Spin Doctors, Phish, and then Blues Traveler was the headliner. And at the time, like I was a huge Blues Traveler fan. I grew up in New Jersey. Those guys were from New Jersey. Like that, they were big in New Jersey long before they were big anywhere else. And so we all knew them in high school. I remember excitedly going out to buy their second album, like the day it came out, Travelers and Thieves, like the day it came out, going to the mall and getting it. So I was a huge fan of those guys. And then, obviously Spin Doctors were just barely starting to blow up at that time. And I'd never heard of ARU or Widespread Panic yet.
Gotcha.
And so all that's new to me. And then, the Spin Doctors, you got the guy out front, whatever his name is, Chris something. Barron, maybe Chris Barron.
Sure.
Sounds right. A lead singer out front who all he does is sing and like flail around and act like an idiot. And you're like, all right, that's interesting. Cool, I guess. And then Phish comes on stage and like they open with Landlady. So they're playing like Latin jazz, but they're like headbanging while they play. And I'm like, I'm in. It instantly was like, this is what I want to hear.
Was that your first? So real quick, was that your first exposure to Phish? Like, had you heard of them before, or because
I definitely had heard. Like, people had put on tapes in at basement parties and stuff in high school. I definitely had heard of them and had heard some Phish, but never listened. Background music, whatever. Like, there's some guitar slinging, whatever in the background, and it's some shitty audience tape or whatever, right? So. It never really grabbed me. It never was a thing. I remember seeing like when Picture and Nectar came out, I remember seeing like the long box CDs at the record store that I would go to at the mall. Right. And being like, I keep hearing people talk about this band, but I didn't buy it. I never it just didn't, for whatever reason, I hadn't really listened to them yet. And then saw them. Right. So the first thing I'm really paying attention to is the Landlady at this big outdoor amphitheater.
Yeah.
Garden State Arts Center in New Jersey. So
with that being 1992, it wasn't per se a jam that hooked you. It was the raw energy. Cause like you said, like and opening with Landlady.
Yeah. and like everything, I don't know. It just was a great show. Like they had, at one point they brought out, the trampolines. And they brought out 3. And like I said, I was a big Blues Traveler fan, right? So they bring out 3 trampolines. And so, I now know, and I knew soon after that it was pretty common for them to bring out 2 trampolines, and Mike and Trey would, bounce on them. And they still do to this day. So they bring out 3 trampolines and the 2 of them start bouncing on 2 of them. And then John Popper comes out and he goes to jump on. He's got his harmonica. I'm like, oh, he's gonna jam with him. This is gonna be awesome because I was a huge fan, right?
Right.
He comes out and he goes and to jump into the middle trampoline they have out there. Turns out it's just like construction paper, like it's a gag. He goes right through it. And then he like gets real sad and like mopes and walks off stage. And that was it. It was just a gag. And I was like, what the hell?
So he was in on it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like it was as if he had broken it, but clearly it was like construction paper or something. Like it was, designed to just fail immediately.
Dude, so they've been on the prank stuff and like the gag stuff since.
Well, and so if you read
beginning.
so that was the first gag with John Popper, and it kept escalating apparently after that. I never saw any of the other like the later incarnations of it. But at one point, like a year or two after that, John Popper had been in a major motorcycle accident, and he would come out on stage in a wheelchair, and then kind of get helped getting up, and then would sit like on just a stool or whatever to play, because he just couldn't really walk all that well for a little while after his accident, but he still toured. And so at one point, they put a huge, like behind Phish, a huge like normal like backyard trampoline behind the band, and then had a wheelchair with a dummy that looked like John Popper in it fall from the ceiling and bounce off. Like it just kept escalating, just like everything in the Phish world, right? Like there's a joke, they're gonna run that joke into the ground until it's not funny anymore.
Dude, that's a massive move, and it could almost be like, I guess it could be misinterpreted. It's like if you have that, it could be like, is that a dig at Popper? But well, like,
I mean, you got to figure that and on Horde Tour, right? So that first show was Horde Tour. They're all on tour together, and they kind of the model was, there had been Lollapalooza, had been a way for these alternative bands to fill big amphitheaters. When none of them could on their own, right? Mm-hmm. That was kind of that's how Lollapalooza started. It was like, well, but if we all band together, if 6 bands play, 8 bands play, whatever it is, we can fill an amphitheater and we can make a little more money than we're making, and it worked, right? So the first Lollapalooza, I think, was 91, and then the first Horde Tour was 92, and it was the same model of like, it's not these alternative bands, it's these hippie bands. They didn't call them jam bands yet,
right?
But it's these kind of post-dead or early 90s hippie bands that play improvisational music. They band together and they do this tour, and so they hung out a lot backstage on tour. And so those things just come out of dudes hanging out backstage having beers and
like, hey,
just
what
laughing, like, won't it be funny if we put another a third trampoline and you just go right through it? And I'm sure John Popper was like just dying laughing and 100% into it. Like there's no way he's like, no, that makes me look bad. No, he's the guy that like leans into that shit for sure.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. What a great first show and like first experience with. So like, go piggybacking off of your first show. How long after that were you like, okay, I'm in, I'm a Phish head, like this is going to consume my life, I'm going to see him as much as I can? Like how long after that were you like, okay, like I'm going to see just Phish like all over the country?
That first show, I was 18. I just graduated high school. Mm-hmm. So it was that summer between high school and college that I saw Phish for the first time. And then, I'm a freshman in college, like you're going to do whatever the hell you want to do in life at that point. Mm-hmm. Like no one can stop me. There are no parents here. There's no, right. Went to a show. The next show I saw was in December up in St. Louis at a place called Mississippi Nights. And had a blast at that show. It was like packed nuts to butts up front, like just could barely move. But it was like, whoa, it was like I was in. And at that point, like that whole fall had really started listening to Phish, and getting into it and getting on to Rec Music Phish, which was, the earliest of message boards, right? If you know anything about kind of the history of that.
I'm not familiar with that. The only one that I was like brought into was the one that we're both on, which is Weekapog.
Weekapog.
So is that kind of like where Weekapog came from? Would you say it was Wrecked Fish?
So, oh, you're such a child.
I know. Learn me, man. Learn me.
Oh my goodness! All this history is out there to go read about if you want. But basically, if in the early days of the internet, right? So I had a modem connected to my computer in my dorm room. It was a 1400 baud modem, which means if I was looking at it, if I was dialed into something and looking at information, it basically like individual letters came across the screen slower than I could read them. Like it was like someone was typing in front of me almost. That's how slow my internet connection was, right?
Gotcha.
But these early, they called them message boards. Or bulletin boards they were called, and they were categorized. It was all kind of run through NetSpace, not NetSpace. I can't remember the name of it, but they were all categorized by like rec was recreation, and there were others, and most of them were academic. Right? It all kind of started with, if you ever have a chance, read the book Heads, which is I think Jesse Jarnow wrote.
Dude, I think
and it's Heads is fantastic.
I have that book. Someone gave it to me on tour.
Dude,
I've never read it.
It's so good. But it book's about way more than just this. But it talks a little bit about the beginnings of the internet, where basically these deadheads who were professors out in California at Stanford, who started communicating with other professors via the internet, like the early internet. So then these kind of bulletin boards started popping up. And the first music-related bulletin board ever was Rec Music GDAD. And the second one, like ever in the history of the internet, was Rec Music Phish. So it was rec.music.phish. And by the time I was on there, like a freshman in college, fall of 1992, they estimated there were something like 15 or 20,000 people on there at that point.
Wow.
And basically it was, people would come in having seen the show that night and would post the set list, and you geek out, see what they played that night, that kind of stuff. You'd meet people, you would, like, hey, I need a ride from X to Y. People would kind of set that stuff up. People started doing tape trades. Those early tape trees were all through that. So tape trees were basically, you'd get the band would have a show they wanted to get out, like that they wanted people to have. The best example of this is in '94 they played the Bomb Factory, right? That epic second set of the Bomb Factory.
Yeah.
That show, the band was like proud of it. Like they wanted to get it out, and so they would run it through. They didn't just give a digital copy of it because it was on DAT, right? So you could, if you had that original DAT, you could basically have what became the live Phish, recording that they officially released. So they wouldn't do that. They would pass it through an analog generation so that it would at least have, some semblance of it's not our official recording. And then they would give it to these tapers who had these connections at Rec Music Phish, really through like Shelley Culbertson, who was like an early person, ended up working for the band straight through till Coventry. But basically you would set up a tape tree where like one guy would have it and he would seed, 10 people, and that first set of 10 people would be like, they'd have to kind of prove they had really good recording dubbing equipment to spread it further. And so that's how tapes got out, broadly, quickly, of things like the Bomb Factory. Like the Bomb Factory became a really famous show, not just because of the set list, but because it got into hands of fans within, like 3 or 4 months of the show. Like it was out there broadly because of these tape trees. And that one, it's really funny, man. Like this guy, Jay Rosenblum was his name, but in Nashville, he was like the tape guy, trading hub of Nashville. Like he would have whole tours by, like, if there was a summer tour, by Christmas, he had almost every show from a tour because he just knew all the tapers and was really good at that stuff. So
he was the plug.
Yeah. Well, I ran into him when I was going to see Medeski, Martin, and Wood, and he just hands me this tape. He goes, "You need to have this." And I was like, "What's this?" And I looked, and it was the Bomb Factory, just the second set. He goes, "You just need to have this." And that tape, it was a Bomb Factory, and then he had lopped off the encore and put the Murat Gin as the filler. So it
Okay.
was the Bomb Factory second set plus the Murat Gin, and that tape didn't leave my tape deck
So
in my
up and
car for probably 5 years.
up until that point that he gave that to you, had you already heard it through these link trees, or was this your
No,
first
that
exposure
one
to it?
I mean, it was literally like that show was what 5/4. It was probably that's what May. It was probably June that he handed that to me. Like it was like a
Gotcha.
month after the show. Like you need to have this.
And then you put it
And
in, and you're
that
like,
is unheard of back then that you would have a tape that soon after a show. Like that's crazy. But he was like, and I looked and he had like 6 of them in his pocket and was just like, anyone he ran into that night, he's like, you need to have this. You need to have this. It
you
wasn't because
gotta
I was
hear
special.
this.
It was because he knew that I would then get it to other people. Like everyone needs to hear this show. It's important, you know?
Yeah. Dude, what an amazing evolution. It's like from that to like now where it's, they're playing a show and in real time you can get
You can
on
watch it.
whatever. Yeah, you can watch it, you pay for it, or if you don't want to pay for it, there's someone there streaming it. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy. It's like instant now. And that's, dude, I wish that we could go back in time right now and I could be with you in your car the first time that you're hearing that, because were you just like mind blown? You had to have been.
Yeah. It's one of those things like, there was a year or so earlier, they did a like the first of what they call the Tweezer Fests, right? Was the what's it called? The Roxy in Atlanta, where they kept going in and out of Tweezer, and it like teased everything, and like just this like long flowing set that was crazy. And I knew about that show almost immediately from Rec Music Phish. People were talking about it. Like, here's the set list from that show, and it was like 80 songs, but like all weaved together, back to this song, back to that song. And I had a ticket, a ride, and a place to stay to that Roxy run, and I didn't go. And so like immediately it was one of those, should have been there. Like I was in Nashville, it's only a few hours away. I had a ticket, a ride, and a place to stay, and I didn't go.
Damn it.
And then the Bomb Factory show I knew about. This is so crazy. I had a cousin getting married right after that in Texas, and I was going to drive down and do the 3 Texas shows, and then hit this cousin's wedding. And then I just didn't. I ended up flying in just for the wedding and flying out. And that was the Bomb Factory show. I was like, I could have been at that. Like, it's just, one of those things always happens, right?
Yeah. Dude,
so I knew about these shows, but until I heard it, I just, and it obviously, that's still, we'll talk about favorite jams later, but, that Bomb Factory is definitely right there for me as one of them.
It's one of the goats. I mean, you can't talk about the goats of Phish jams without mentioning that. But what you were saying of like how you were right there and you missed that show, that recently happened to me, not with Phish, but with Billy Strings. He was just in Detroit and he was doing a Saturday night and a Sunday night.
Help Slip Frank, didn't he?
Yes, dude. He did. Because it was sold out by the time I was going to get tickets. The Saturday was sold out, and that was going to be the one that I hit, obviously, because, work the next day, it's a Sunday show. That's why they say never miss a Sunday show. But there were still tickets available for the Sunday show. And my girlfriend and I, we were on the fence about it. And we were decided no, it's coming into Thanksgiving. We're going to be busy trying to get everything done, set it out, and then looked at the set list, saw it on YouTube. And I was like, damn it.
He's playing a couple nights here at the Moody. And I was literally on Ticketmaster when they went on sale and didn't get tickets. Like it sold out that fast. Dude, it was like trying to get New Year's tickets. It was crazy.
He's buzzing right now. He's the guy.
He was just on Austin City Limits, the TV show, and I actually went to that taping, which was really cool.
You posted about that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Or that was your first show back seeing live music.
Oh, well, no. So I saw him play. He played an outdoor show where we each had our own little pod. We had to stay in.
Square, yeah.
That was my first show back. It was him, and it was outside, and I cried.
Dude, it's emotional.
Yeah. It really
especially
was,
with people like us, we're like live music is our medicine, if you want to call it that. We need it, and having to set out a year and a half of that.
Brutal.
Yeah. So. All right, enough Billy Strings. You mentioned we're going to talk about favorite jams. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. It's impossible to pick one. So we're not doing top fives. We're not doing top threes. Just whenever you think of like your favorite jams, like you're talking about the Bomb Factory, you know, what are some other ones that like pop in your head to where you're like, this is a top one for me?
So this kind of goes back to the first kind of how did you get hooked,
Mm-hmm.
thing. But so I started seeing shows, um, and I saw, a couple in 92, and then 93 I saw a handful in the summer, maybe in the spring. I can't remember all of them, but then um, that they took the fall off to go record Hoist, and then I went to the New Year's run, the 4 shows of the New Year's run, and
In 93?
yeah, 93, 94 New Year's run, and they we had a great crew of folks. There were 4 of us in a car, and it was 4 nights, and we being just the already good people that we are, not to toot our own horn, but we each had a night where we were designated driver.
Oh yeah, smart.
And of the 4 nights. And so I'm not going to talk about the 3 other nights, but the night I was a designated driver was still probably my favorite show I've ever been to, and except maybe Big Cypress. And that's 12/30/93 in Portland, Maine. And the Mike song from that, it's one of those, there's the second Mike's Jam people talk a little bit about these days, if you're a nerd like me.
Right.
The second jam that night, it's if you find it, there's a YouTube of that Mike's you can find, but maybe 6 minutes in through 10 minutes in, like those 4 minutes of Phish are why I'm a Phish head. Like those 4 minutes, and I'm going to see this band as much as possible from this point forward in my life. And I remember it as clear as it was yesterday. Like those 4 minutes, I'm done. Like I whatever these guys are going to do, if we're going to have moments like this, I'm going to chase them. I'm going to find them. And like I said, I was designated driver that night. I was as clear headed as I've ever been in my entire life, and just in for the ride wherever it's going.
Dude, it's amazing that it's I'm trying not to go off on a tangent here. It's amazing whenever you do see Phish sober, because we all know about the lifestyle and everything that goes into that. But like whenever you do see Phish sober and get something like that, like a little gift, a jam or something, and you're completely in your wits, it almost hits better than if you're under the influence of anything, because you're like, this is 100% real. Like I'm all here for this, and it's emotional almost.
Yeah.
It's
and I mean, that. So anyway, that's one. To get back on topic, that's
thank you.
That Mike's is, and then from there it goes, like it's a killer. 2001 into Mike's, it's a killer Mike's, the first segment of it. Then there's that segment that just shreds me. And part of what I like about it, it's the first time I remember where there's like they'll do like 8 bars of like one theme, and then all together 8 bars of another, and then all together back to 8 bars of that first theme, and they go back and forth, and they're just locked in and doing that. And so some of my favorite jams are when that happens.
Gotcha.
Right. That stuff is what just gets me every time, because when you're first hearing it, when you're at the show, and you don't realize at first that's what's happening. Like it's just a great jam. They're like, something really cool is happening. This is awesome. And then it turns, and you're like, oh, well, this is really cool too. And they kind of all turn together. And then, 8 bars later, sometimes it's 16, it just slams right back into where you came from. And you're like, oh, and then they start going back and forth, and each time building and getting bigger and better. And you're just like, oh man. So it's kind of the first time that happened to me. It's part of why I love that one. The Bomb Factory Tweezer, the first Tweezer segment, before they go into anything else, before it transitions into any other songs, there's a blues segment like that. where they're playing this like really like Trey's just playing this wailing bluesy riff,
Just ripping.
and it's, you know, like Stevie Ray Vaughan blues. Like it's really, really good. And it does that. Like it drops out to this whole other kind of really mellow theme. And then it slams right back in 8 bars later. And you're just like, those are my favorite, man. Like because it just takes you for the ride, and it's almost unbelievable that that's not rehearsed. Right. That they all four are landing into these themes, and they know, all right, we're going to do this for 8 bars, and we're going to go right back to that other, and we're going to go back and forth. There's a jam there's a couple from Big Cypress that are like that too, where you're just like, oh, like, I think it's the Rock and Roll has that kind of calypso jam where it keeps going back and forth between 2 themes, and it's amazing.
And that's why it's so, you just said the word, that's why it's so amazing, because it's not rehearsed. Like all it takes is one member to be like, okay, we did 8 bars this time. Are we going to do 16 bars this time? And throw it off. Like the fact that they're so.
And it's, you know, it's just like a look.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's no hand signal. There's nothing. It's just a like sideways glance from one of them that goes,
yeah.
Right. You know?
Yeah. Like, or a, hey, Mike, stay on F.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's that.
Sometimes it's that for sure. That's a great example.
Yeah. Dude, it's
the other big, so a jam that not a lot of people maybe talk about that is still my kind of hands down favorite big build jam is from Big Cypress, and that's the Cross-Eyed and Painless. So the Cross-Eyed and Painless from Big Cypress, I was just in it that night, like as everyone else was. Like that was the moment for me that night. But listening back on it, every time I hear it, it just tears me to shreds, because Trey's doing a lot of, he was playing a lot with the kind of the boomerang, like looping himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but not in ways that I remember him doing elsewhere. And it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And it's one of those, like, it takes 20 minutes, but it's almost it's building the same theme. Like there's a theme he sets out really early in it, and for 20 minutes builds on that theme and builds on that theme. And that to me is, man, it just shows so much patience, but it just, by the end of it, they are just raging, just absolutely raging. And then they close it out by bringing the lyrics back in, and you know, you're just like, oh, what? Like it's just my favorite jam. And it's one, you know, people talk about a few different jams from that night, but that's the one to me.
That's yours. And you were there.
Yeah. If you'd asked me
of the shows,
you could have asked me, like, once I had done that 93, 94 New Year's run, if you had asked me at any moment between then and when Big Cypress happened, where I would be on 12/31/99, I would have told you wherever Phish is. I know that's like, anyone, all my friends, same thing. Like, we know that's coming. That's a date for a decade that is on the calendar. We know is coming. Like, wherever Phish is, that's where I'm going to be. I don't care where that is.
It could be on the moon.
Yeah,
get me a ticket.
We'll be there.
That's awesome, dude. Any other jams that pop in your head that you would classify?
Those are the big ones, man. That suck me in every time. You know, more recently they all kind of blend together. Like they're great. They're playing, like, I just was at the Vegas run, and there's some, you know, they're playing just fantastic right now. But I can't, like, there are none that I that I go back to from this era at all, that I just like have to go back to over and over, like those ones. You know?
Yeah. I mean,
and then you guys mentioned, I'll pick a bone with you a little bit.
Go for it.
So on the last episode, you guys are all about the Halloween '94 Reba.
Yeah.
And my buddy Wen, who you know, he's all about the New Year's '95 Reba.
That's his.
You know, absolutely. There's no better than that one for him.
Okay.
For me, it's Clifford Ball. The Clifford Ball Reba.
Clifford Ball.
Hands down, my favorite Reba ever. Dude, so there you go.
That is a good one too. And I will say this: I'm not scared to say this, but whenever I first was getting into like deep into Phish and, you know, finding like my favorite versions and stuff. One of the ones that stuck out early for me was that Lowell Reba, 95, like,
Lowell
oh,
Mass.
low. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been pronouncing it wrong this whole time.
Yeah, you pronounce Worcester wrong too, by the way.
Dude, I butcher so much stuff on here and on my other
So you
podcast
guys were
too.
like, I'm very sure it's Worcester is how where you landed after that. I'm like, no, it's Worcester.
No, it's Worcester. Okay, well,
It's
now I know.
Worcester, and the sauce is Worcestershire.
Worcestershire. I've always said Worcestershire.
Worcestershire, and it's Worcester, and then there's a shire on the end of it, but it's just Worcestershire.
I'm still gonna butcher it for probably the rest of my life. But yeah.
So yeah, Lowell Mass. That's a great Reba too. It's a fantastic Reba.
So that was the first one where I was like, "This is amazing." That was the first jam, the first Phish jam that made me tear up, like get emotional with. And I was talking, you know, on message boards about it and stuff, and every single person was like, "Oh, that's overrated. Overrated. You need to check this one out. Overrated." And I just got shit on for like that being my favorite one. And I was like,
"No,
okay,
that's a great Reba, man. You're
dude,
not wrong.
It's so good. It's so emotional."
When was it that show too, man?
Damn.
He showed up at that show and put his finger in the air and got in.
Dude, that's awesome. And that was like the opening. That was the opener of '95, right?
It was a benefit, and it was like they weren't playing places that small anymore, right? Like that just, it was unheard of at that point. And yeah, it was a benefit for like Voters for Choice or something like that. And it was the last kind of political thing Phish did as a band ever. And they felt weird about it because it felt like it was dividing. Like it wasn't, not all their fans were on board. They decided not to be political, though Fishmen, obviously.
I was just about to say everyone except Phish.
Yeah.
So transitioning out of your favorite jams or our favorite jams, what would it be a jam, or would it be a song, or would it be an album if you were going to try and if you were going to try and show someone Phish that had never heard of them, to try and like get them on board and be like, hey man, kind of like that dude handed you that tape of the Bomb Factory. He's like, you got to have this, you know, just, you love music. What would your go-to be to be like, hey, check out this band. Like, you're going to love them.
Yeah. It's a really hard question. And I think the only way to answer that question for me is to come in knowing what that person likes. Like, what kind of music are you into?
Yep.
Right. Because, you know, I've won some people over a little bit, not that they go to shows and are fans now, but I've won people over by like playing them Phish doing Bowie. Like, you know, if you're a huge Bowie fan and you throw on that Bowie set from Vegas where they do Ziggy Stardust front to back, people are blown away.
Yep.
Like they can see the reverence, and they can, like, they get it. They get why it's important and why the band's doing what they're doing and stuff like that. So it just depends. It really depends. Sometimes, like, I've had some friends who are like metalheads, and so like I'm gonna play them the Sloth and like see what they think, right? Like that kind of shit. If they're Deadheads, you know, I know that they have some patience for longer things and stuff like that, right?
They understand the jamming aspect.
Yeah. And they have some patience to get through some of the, you know, whatever. So I'll suggest whole shows for them. And I lean on that 12/30/93 show because it's one of my favorites ever. It's really playful first set. And you know, the big jams in the second set are great. There's a great, you know, McGrupp, which, you know, if you're a Deadhead, you know, to hear that piano solo in McGrupp, you're going to be like, all right, you know, these guys get it. These guys are fantastic.
Right.
So yeah, I'll pick out, you know, shows like that, and just for Deadheads, yeah, there's always something I can grab them with, I feel like.
Right. For the sake of working our brains here, let's say the person that we're trying to convince is a average just person. They like me. They don't hate music. They like music. They don't necessarily have a favorite band. On their commute to work, they turn on top 40 radio station and listen to what's playing currently at the time. What are we going with?
I'm 47 years old.
Okay.
The last time I had a friend who listened regularly to like top 40 music was 20 years ago, man. I don't know the answer to this.
Okay.
Like, I'm not the one to ask, man.
Too hard. We'll go with the studio
Like,
cut.
top 40 is tough, man. Like I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
We'll just go with Billy Breathes.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, yeah, maybe it takes an album or something. Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Too much.
Honestly, I would be like, all right, you need to listen to the band first. And like start to understand, and maybe some Neil Young, and start to understand what exists outside of your world, and then maybe we can work our way over to Phish.
Yeah. Like, let's start with classic rock.
Yeah, or at least some soul, some I don't know, some old funkadelic or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel bad for that person that I just made up.
I mean, I'm just that person's not my age. Like I'm a different generation than you almost.
Yeah,
not really. Like we're not that far off, but like someone who listens to top 40 at this point in life, I don't know anybody like that. That's
Well, see, I know a lot of people like
what
that.
My opinion is.
I know a lot of people like that just because I work in radio.
I that's fair.
Program, a station like that. So I guess that's why my brain went to that. I was like, okay, I'm going to convince all my listeners on the station to like Phish. We could transition out of that. That's a hard one.
Play Bouncing Around the Room. That's the big radio hit.
Yeah, that's a fun one. What is, I always like to do, I like this question because it kind of, we all love this band, but we also have those songs to where we're like, it comes on and we're like, even though it's still our favorite band in the world and we're at the show or we're listening to it, the song comes on and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go take a bathroom break. What is that one Phish song for you, or there might be multiple, you would be okay with just never hearing again?
So to know me is to know the answer to this question.
Okay, well, let me know you.
Fucker Pants.
Fucker Pants? You don't like it?
I can't. I cannot. There's nothing, and there's just nothing about that song I can pretend to like.
Even the couple of times it's been jammed, like nothing.
I was at which of the balls was it up in Watkins Glen where everyone raves about the Fucker Pants?
Was that?
Anyway, it's Tweezer, and they go into that.
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes.
And to me, they go back into Tweezer. It's Tweezer. A little interlude of Fucker Pants, and it's Tweezer again. That's not.
So not even that one?
No, that's the part I like is Tweezer. Like they go back into Tweezer as far as I'm concerned.
It is Tweezer. Okay, Fucker Pants it is. I wasn't expecting that one.
Actually, and I'll tell you a funny story because the one time that I actually like had a real conversation with a member of Phish. I have to tell you this story because he asked me this. Not the specific question.
Wait, hold on. This is you having a conversation with a member.
Yeah, so this was in Chicago, UIC run in 2011, right?
Okay.
And it was the night before those shows, and had a bunch of friends that were in town, and ended up most of them came in the next day, but that night before it was just me and my buddy Heath. Jay Fishman on the pod.
Yeah.
And we're hanging out at this bar, just having a few drinks. And Fishman was there with a couple people sitting at a table. And I was like, just leave him alone. Like, let's not bother him. We're having drinks. He's having drinks. Like, whatever. Cool. He's there, which is what I would normally do. Mm-hmm. Right. If you see him at a restaurant, where I'm just not the guy that's going to bother him there, having their own thing and whatever. Right. I get up to go to the bathroom and I come back and my buddy's at the table, like chatting him up. And I was like, okay, we're doing this.
I would be that same person. I couldn't let the moment slip away.
So, we start shooting the shit or whatever. And he's like, do you have any requests? Like, you're going to be at the next 3 shows.
No shit.
Do you have any requests? And I was like, no, man, play whatever you want. Like, it's 2011. So I'm still pretty much in that zone of I'm just happy you guys are playing. right? Like, you're back, you're playing. I don't care. Play whatever. I've been doing this 20 years at that point. Like, whatever you want to play, you know? And he just kept egging me on. Like, there's something. Like, what do you want to hear? There's something. I was like, really? Whatever you guys want to play, I'm just so happy. He goes, all right, how about this? There's got to be something that you just don't want to hear over the next 3 nights. He goes, and I don't have a lot of say on set lists, but I get veto power always. Like, I can always just say no to a song. He goes, tell me a song you don't want to hear because I'm probably sick of it too. And I didn't say Fucker Pants.
What did you say?
I held my tongue because I would have called it Fucker Pants, and I was like, I can't do that. And so at the time, my number, like, I'm a stats nerd a little bit, you know, on Zizek stats or whatever. And at the time, my number one song that I'd seen the most was Sample in a Jar, which is just not my favorite. And so I said Sample in a Jar, and they didn't play it.
Nice. Did they play? I'm not familiar with the set list of that show. Did they play Prince Caspian or no?
No, they didn't play that either.
Good.
But then, you know, and he really did keep egging me on to make a request. And I finally was like, one song I've never heard I'd love to hear is Alumni Blues. And he just kind of snickers and he goes, yeah, we don't play that very much. And
like, why'd you keep asking me, man?
Didn't expect it. Wasn't like, you know, he kind of shrugged it off. Like, there's no way they're going to play this song. And the first night of that run, somebody, not me, totally unrelated to me, somebody blew up a giant yellow balloon, like 5 feet in diameter, and it said Alumni Blues on it. And the whole first set, like, it kept landing on stage. Trey kept kicking it back out into the audience. And he finally was like, I guess we got to play it. And they clearly hadn't rehearsed it. Like, the Jimmy Page segment was a wreck, like just a train wreck. But they played it, and I'd never heard it before. And I had this conversation just the night before with Fishman, and I went nuts. I was like, I can't believe they played it. It had nothing to do with me that they played it. It wasn't because Phish wanted to play it. It was because this balloon,
right?
You know,
and I wonder,
nothing to do with me. But it still was like, you played my request. I can't believe it.
And I wonder if in Fishman's brain, like,
as like, I wonder if that kid made the balloon. Wasn't me. Totally wasn't me.
Fishman, if you're hearing this, it wasn't Dave. He's like, that guy blew up a fucking balloon.
Nope,
not me.
Totally wasn't me. But I went nuts nonetheless. I was so like, and Heath was with me, and we were like, oh my God, I can't believe he's playing it.
That's awesome, dude. So piggybacking off of just knowing now that you've sat and had beers with Fishman, what band member do you think that, well, first off, is that the only band member that you've met? Have you met any of the other ones?
I have, like, Mike always in the lot. Like, I've high-fived him. Great show last night. Like, you know, you see him all over the place because he's just that guy, especially back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Like, you know, just you'd be hanging out, even like really small shows. Like, we'd just be hanging. I remember the show in like New Orleans. It was on like Tulane campus, fall of '94. I can't remember the name of it. Macaulay. No, that's not it. Some theater on Tulane campus. We're like hanging out before the show, like in the lawn in front of the little theater, like just kicking a hacky sack like you do in the mid 90s. And Mike's just kind of hanging out, and we're just like, hey, great show last night, man. Can't wait for tonight. Yeah, cool, thanks. Like that kind of stuff. Trey, I've never really met. I've been in close proximity to him, not at a show, which is weird, but never like met him or anything. And Paige, same thing. Like, one night he literally stumbled into me drunk, and I was like, that kind of stuff. But I never have had like a conversation with him or anything like that.
Gotcha.
So to answer your question, Fishman, though, I mean, I would just want to sit around and, listen to him tell stories, talk bullshit with him, talk politics with him. Like,
yeah,
I just feel like I could hang out with that dude for hours and laugh and be, on the same wavelength with, more or less.
I feel like he would be the most fun. And I was saying on the last episode, it would be really hard for me, like as a guitar player, to not pick Trey to be the one that like.
Yeah, but are you going to geek out about guitar? Like, he doesn't want to talk about that.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
You know
so,
what
like,
I mean?
So like as far like trying to like remove him from it, like I'm going with Fishman all day. Like sit down, have a couple beers, shoot the shit. Like I feel like he's gonna be the most fun, you know?
That said, like, it's weird. I have a weird amount in common with Trey. Like, I feel like I could talk to him for hours too.
Yeah.
Just like growing up in suburban New Jersey, going to private school and shit. Like before he went to Taft, he was at Princeton Day School PDS. We used to swim against them. We used to like have concerts with them. Like I was in the choir, whatever, the Glee Club.
Oh, you
Like
guys would
we
connect on
did.
that for sure.
Yeah. Like he would know like the like his choral director. He would have known. He would like we could talk about our choral director. He'd know him because he was there when Trey's 10 years older than me, but those teachers were there for a long time.
Yeah.
There would be things like that we could talk about. And, I grew up going to musicals all the time like he did. And I'm still kind of a nerd for that stuff, which is.
Oh, yeah. You guys would hit it off in that area for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm pretty sure, we have some common things.
With Trey, I feel like it's always going to go back to the music though.
Yeah.
And with Fishman, I feel like you can just sit down and talk with him for 3 hours and not get brought up one time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Which is why I choose him, because I could just hang out. Like I feel like
it's not like you have to know all the. Oh yeah, no, I don't know this or I don't know that about music.
And it's also just kind of that attitude of like Trey's into being Trey a little bit, and like God love him.
Yeah, I would be if I was Trey. I would be into being Trey too.
You have to be like that's why he is who he is, right? He's the genius who drives all of that. Like his creativity is just 10x everyone else's around him, and always will be, and always has been.
Yep.
He has to be into being Trey because that's what he is. Fishman, like my favorite kind of Fishman moment of all time is in Bittersweet Motel. He's like, "Why would we want to make a movie about ourselves again? Help me understand what we're doing here. Like this is dumb. I don't want."
Like, what are we doing? He just
I'm just a drummer. I don't need any of this shit.
He just feels super normal, and whatever normal means, like a normal guy. Like he doesn't put off rock star vibes,
Yeah, like why? What?
Yeah, I love Bittersweet Motel. Like, is that the part where he's like shoving a Twinkie into his face?
No, no, it's like they're in Europe or something. I don't know. He just is like, why? Like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, what's going on?
And I think it's right before. I think the next scene is where they go knock on his door, and he's like, "Yeah, no, it's not happening today.
Not today, man."
I just got in.
So knowing that you've been seeing Phish since 1992, sure. I'm sure you have a plethora of favorite memories from different tours or different shows. Does one or a couple of even memories like pop outs where you're like a favorite memory or like something happening to where you're like, oh my God, like that's real standout moment? Do you have any of those? That I know that you do, but like which ones pop into your head?
I mean, I don't know. It's a really hard question, right? There's stories that I can tell and stories I shouldn't. Yeah. There are. We talked about one, like the one time you and I really hung out was in Chicago.
Yep.
I could tell that story real quick. That's a short one and kind of funny.
Yeah, go for it.
We shared a hotel room, and I can't even remember who else was in the room. You probably remember.
Gunner, yeah. Gunner.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to tell a story about Gunner.
Okay, go for it.
I totally forgot that you're buddies with Gunner, man. I love that kid, and I miss him because he used to live here in Austin for a long time, and I would get to hang out with him every so often, and I haven't seen him in a long time, man.
Yeah, he's in Oklahoma now.
I know. So the first time I met Gunner, this is one of my just favorite stories, actually. So we're going to whatever the first of the Watkins Glen one was, right? Mm-hmm. And I had a rental car. I'd been up in Toronto for work, and I drove down from Toronto in this rental car and was going in and was going to I was meeting some people at like the Walmart somewhere like maybe an hour away from Watkins Glen. And they were like, we don't have room in our car for this kid, and you're by himself. Can you drive him in? Right. And that was Gunner. So I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Right. Well, I got room. I got this rental car. And so we met at this Walmart. I never met him, where I'm, perfect. Walmart, I need to get supplies. So I'm buying, whatever I need, all sorts of stuff, beer mostly, like, whatever. So and he's with me, and literally just met this kid. Checking out at the Walmart, and she's like, I need to see your ID because I'm buying beer. So show her my ID. She's like, I need to see his ID too. And he's like, I left it in the car. I don't have it with me. And I was like, oh shit, he's probably not 21. I have no idea. I've never met this kid. And he's totally not. He was 20 at the time, or maybe even 19, I think.
Oh my God.
And so I'm like, she's like, well, if he's with you, I can't sell you this beer because New York law says you're buying it for him. He's a minor, or he doesn't have ID or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what the fuck, man?
You're like, you're like, are you for real, man?
What's happening? He's like, if he's with you, I go, I don't even know this kid. She goes, yeah, but you guys are here together. And I was like, so I was like, fine, so I just left like cases of beer that someone had to go put back on the shelves because I'm like, I'm not putting it back. Like, here, take it. And I just bought all the other stuff that I needed. And then we get in the car, and I'm like, well, I got to find a liquor store. So I need beer. Like, I'm buying beer somewhere.
Right.
It's like, stay in the damn car.
Yeah. It's like, come on, man. He's like, hey,
So-
you want to get me some cases too?
So then we're driving, like, we have an hour or more to get to Watkins Glen. We were in the car a solid 45 minutes talking the whole time
Mm-hmm.
before we realized we both live in Austin. Like, before that came up.
You're like, oh, no shit.
Yeah. What?
Had you guys, because I know he's on the Pog too. Had you conversed before on the Pog, or was it
I don't remember, man. This is a long time ago.
Gotcha.
I don't remember. I'm really bad at Pog names and real in-person names.
Right. It gets confusing.
To this day, like, people there are a couple people who I've seen, for over a decade now, since 2009, 2010, who, like, in person, I know their name and I know who they are, and I know they're on the Pog, but I don't know who they are on the Pog. I'm just really bad at that game.
There's like a few on the, like, you're one. You mentioned Heath earlier. That's one. And then Scott.
And he's been to Jazz Fest a bunch of times. I've hung out with him, outside of the Phish world quite a bit too.
Yeah, I saw him whenever I lived in Portland. Hung out with him a couple of times. We saw a couple of shows together. But yeah, it's hard placing the names. I think Gunner on there is Ed Banky. Or I haven't been on in a while.
Actually, I'll tell you a funny story of hanging out in Portland. I was out in Portland for work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I met up with Heath and Hicks.
Oh, yeah, Hicks.
And what's his name? Caravan. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Todd.
Yep.
So I'm like, I'm in town. Let's go out for beers. And we're at this place. Portland's great beers in Portland. Like, it's a beer town, right? It's perfect.
Yep.
We're hanging out, and there's a table right next to us, and it's almost like it's picnic tables to where they're at the same table. Like, they're super close to us, and we just start talking. And there's, the four of us, and I don't know, 3 or 4 girls at this table, and there, comes up that I live in Texas, and like that. And she's like, "How do you guys know each other?" And we're like, "Oh, from the internet." And she goes, "What do you mean?" And without skipping a beat, Hicks just goes, "Have you ever heard of furries?" And they all just were like, "Okay," and start moving away from us. And we're like, just kidding.
No. It's like the opposite of like the thing you want to say, like you're sitting at a table. Have you heard of furries? Yes. If you're in Portland, they have heard of furries.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's fantastic. And we're we're just Phish heads, and they're like, "Oh, that's sort of normal."
Yeah.
Like, on the scale of things, furries.
Yeah.
Phish heads.
Yeah, I'll take Phish head over furry any day. That's awesome, dude. What a line. I'm gonna have to use that at some point. Heard of furries? I'm not one.
Anyway, man, Portland's a great town. Both Portlands are, man. I love Portland. I've spent a lot of time in Portland, Maine over the years.
I've never been to Portland, Maine, but I've heard good things. So, but yeah, man. Any other stories or any other Phish things you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I don't know, man. It's it's interesting. If you've been doing this a long time like I have, and it's funny, I'm an old school head because 92 seems like a long time ago.
It does. I was 2 years
And it
old.
is on some level like it's 30 years of doing this.
Mhm.
I haven't quite hit 200 shows. I consider myself a medium Phish head because I know people who have been doing it so much longer, and I know people who've seen so many more shows than I have. And I just know people who are like, I'm diehard. Like I have a Phish license plate. Like I'm a Phish geek. Like I really
Right.
am. Right. To know me is to know that I love Phish, and that's what I do with my free time.
Mhm.
But I'm a medium Phish head. Like, there are people in this world who are way more into it than I am, even, right?
Right. There's
So it's
always
hard
that
to explain
next.
to people who aren't,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, because
But so like
even
we got one of the like what are the CID packages for the Vegas run out there,
Mhm.
and just really lucky with the seats that we ended up with, and we were in the like family zone, the Phish family zone, right?
Oh,
And you're in those same seats for 4 nights. You get to know the people around you a little bit. And the two people in front of us just started, talking with them on the first night, really got to know them over the course of 4 nights a little bit. And like when I say I'm a medium Phish head, like this guy was like, I was at 80 shows by the end of the 80s,
wow.
right? Like he's like, I started seeing Phish in Vermont in 87, 88.
Wow.
Right. And you're like, oh, okay. Right. The woman who was with him, same thing. Like they're just old school, like in the family kind of Phish heads, to the point where like she wasn't there at the beginning of the Halloween show. Like for the first two songs, I was like, where's your friend? He's like, oh, she'll be here. And then she shows up, and she's like, hey, did anybody grab an extra one of those comic books? And I was like, nah, we each got one. And she goes, I was handing them out for the last 2 hours and I forgot to grab one for myself.
So they're in the.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'm a medium Phish head. Like, I'm just not that old school. Like, it seems like I am. It's been 30 years, and I am definitely, there's no band I like more. Like, I'm a Phish head first. All the other things that I do are related to that somehow. All the other music I listen to, the places I go, and all that stuff are somehow, feed back into that probably. But I'm not that crazy a Phish head. Like I know way, way crazier, man.
Yeah. And even
That
like me describing like, talking to someone that's not in the Phish world, and like it gets brought up, because I got the sticker on my car or wear a shirt or whatever. And they'll usually be the ones that bring it up. They're like, oh, Phish, because it's like something they've heard of. And I'm like, oh yeah, no. And I'll say like, yeah, I've seen them 52 times. And they're like, you've seen them 52 times? And I'm like,
you went 4 nights in a row,
yeah.
same
And I'm like,
band.
trust me. I was like, that doesn't even, I was like, there's people, just trust me. It's not
Yeah.
that bad for me.
But
But
then
yeah.
like it comes up at like a Thanksgiving dinner for people, right?
Yep.
So like I said, we kind of did our family thing the weekend before. I think we were talking about this maybe before we were on air, but like we got together the weekend before Thanksgiving to kind of not to beat the crowds and have cheaper flights and stuff. And
Hmm.
we're having a Thanksgiving kind of dinner with people who are old family friends of our base, basically family, cousins maybe, but they're not really.
Hmm.
And of course it comes up, you're at a table with, 10 people, it comes up. You really still go do that?
Yeah.
And like, how do you respond to that? So, my typical response to that is always, do you know anyone who has season tickets to a football team? That's me.
Yeah.
Like me and my friends, we have season tickets to Phish. We get together every year and go, like, if there's going to be a Halloween run, we're going to go. And that's when we get together. It's when I see my friends. It's what we do.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
That's a perfect way to explain it.
Yeah.
It
I
makes
mean,
us
and
seem not as.
somebody like that. Like I
Yep.
live in Austin, Texas, man. There are people who never miss a UT game.
Yep.
Right.
Hmm.
You never see them without something burnt orange on, always.
Right.
Right.
And as a
That's me.
Sooner,
Like,
I have to say that's not a good color.
you know, My wife's a UT student right now getting a master's. So.
Okay, you gotta keep the horns up. I get it.
My mom went to UT. She graduated in '64.
Gotcha. Okay. I won't bash on Texas then.
No, you can. I don't really care. I didn't go there.
You're like, I don't have a dog in this fight. Well, Dave,
I did know this before I knew any
Oh, I knew
words.
This before I knew. Yeah. Same thing, just the opposite way. Oh man. But dude, Dave, thank you so much for being.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's fun to talk about this stuff and geek out a little bit. I enjoy it for sure.
I do too, man. Thank you so much, and hopefully I'll see you at a show, or maybe not even a show, sometime soon.
Yeah, come to Jazz Fest, man. Hang out,
dude.
With us.
I want to. I've never been. Yeah. It's on my bucket list, and I will make that happen.
Yeah. Let me know if you do, man.
What's the time frame on that?
Jazz Fest is always the last weekend in April and the first weekend in May.
Got it. Okay.
So, and I haven't missed one in a long, long time. Like, I'll be there.
Cool.
Let me know.
I would love to do that. All right, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Cheers.
All right. See you soon. Bye.